Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and a warm welcome to our speakers who have made this Automechanika webinar possible. The webinar is hosted in association with APSA and fully supported by the RMI. By way of introduction, I'm Neil Piper, the Head of Digital Marketing and Content for Messi Frankfurt, South Africa. And to set the scene today, Automechanika is the world's largest network of international B2B events for the automotive aftermarket, which includes events in over 17 countries. Automechanika decided to launch a webinar series in 2021 with a focus on industry and trade, covering a series of panel discussions on current topics with international key players, associations, and other relevant industry stakeholders. The series has been rolled out in many of the Messi Frankfurt subsidiaries around the world with great interest and international appeal. As we build to hosting Automechanika as a live in-person event at NASREC taking place between the 7th to 10th of June this year, we will host one more webinar as a foundation for the event. If you have not registered your attendance at Automechanika, please head to the Automechanika website and register today. It's going to be a superb event. The webinar theme for today is Powered by Gas, why Autogas is a viable alternative energy source. Before we start, can I please ask that all questions are posted in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer as many questions as part of the panel discussion that will take place towards the end of the webinar. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our esteemed speakers. We have got Eddie Cook, who's an independent gas consultant. Eddie serves as a director on Southern African Gas Association and is the technical standards convener for CNG, LNG and biogas standards at SABS. Eddie is also currently serving as the technical director of Southern African Biogas Industries Association. He started a consultancy company specializing in CNG, LNG and biogas consultation services, specializing in upgrading of biogas to be used as compressed biogas for industrial and vehicle fuel applications. Currently consulting in coal bed methane projects in and around Southern African countries to use CNG and LNG technologies to take standard gas to the market. He is also currently working on LNG and biogas standards for South Africa to be included in PER, and is also the standards chairman for alternative fuels for vehicles at the SABS, from EV to hydrogen, assisting NAMSA and RMI in the automotive industry for new technical applications in the South African manufacturing industry. Welcome, Eddie. Next up, we have got Ati Serfontein. He's the National Director of the Automotive Remanufacturers Association. He's got a passion for motoring matters, and he started his career with the Retail Motor Industry Organization, the RMI, in 2014 as a consumer affairs specialist. He was appointed as the National Associational Director in 2017 for the Engine Remanufacturers Association, the ERA, the South African Diesel Fuel Injection Association, and the Automotive Component Remanufacturers Association. The aforementioned associations have subsequently amalgamated in the last quarter of 2019, and they work under one new brand, the Automotive Remanufacturers Association, the ARA, and at current heading, and he's heading up the ARA as the National Associational Director. Welcome, Ati. Then we have got Frank Mcnichol. He is the ARA chairman. Frank started his career in the automotive aftermarket in the 70s with Fiat and BMW. He moved on to Mercedes-Benz to further branch out and to upskill himself for his career. He later went on and joined an automotive engineering company, and after a few years purchased the company. Alma Engineering is a fully equipped automotive machine workshop, assembly workshop, and yellow machine workshop with 5-star grading. Mr. Mcnichol is qualified as an artisan and spent time in the UK at the Perkins factory plant before ADE started up. He went on to complete all possible courses that ADE offered and completed then what they called then the Federal Mogul, now known as Drive courses as well. Further studies included the moderator and accessor qualifications. Frank, it's great to have you with us today. And then last but by no means least, we've got Justin Smith, the head of new sector development for ABSA. Justin is an experienced leader in the financial services sector with strong analytical and business development skills. He's got over 14 years of rich industry experience, and he has successfully driven innovation and started new focus areas within the organization. Justin heads new sector development in retail and business bank, where manufacturing, transport, and logistics, as well as renewable energy, are focus sectors in his portfolio. He is responsible for this energy, for the sector strategy, the growth, the value proposition, and to ensure that the key sectors align with the growth of the South African economy. So that's it. Welcome to our panelists. And to get the ball rolling, Eddie Cook will be our first speaker for the day. So Eddie, welcome. And all the way from Germany today, thank you for taking the time to be with us. Looking forward to what you have to say.
Thank you, everybody. And yeah, nice and sunny weather in Berlin today. I'm just going to put on my presentation so that I can share it with you guys. Just a sec. And thank you for this opportunity. I hope I can bring some value to the discussion today and just share some of my experiences in the last 20 years. Whenever you start a new project or a new development in the industry, it's always important to look at certain functions in the industry and actually say, how does it fit in? What's important? And as you can see here, there's quite a few factors to consider, especially when we start talking about a fuel, a gas as such. A lot of people are scared of gas, but in my view, this is not what is important. As soon as systems and people and business and everything comes together, you don't need to have any fear of the new technology. It's more about upskilling people and presenting the technology, which in my view, the gas conversion technology is a proven technology, but other people will go further into this sector itself. You heard the words PER, and I think it's very important that I actually explain it for you. Part of the Occupational Safety Act, there's also the Pressure Equipment Regulation, which started in 2009. That was a new start from the adopted Pressure Equipment Directive from Europe, and it actually replaces the old vessels under pressure regulations. And all gas systems, gas components, and all the applications around gas gets covered in this. And this is what's important for a new industry, to be aware that things must be done safely, certain standards must be kept. And that's why we also have a lot of standards and regulations in our country, which is already in place for the conversion of vehicles as an alternative fuel. There's also a body registered by the Department of Employment of Labour, the SA2CC Gas, which actually registered qualified practitioners, which then in turn can issue a COC for installations that's been completed, which is up to standard and safe to use for the consumer at the end of the day, being it the vehicle owner, being the vehicle operator, whatever the case may be, to ensure the safety of that. It also ensures that all the qualities and the right type of equipment was used and everything was fitted to local or international standards. There's a lot of standards that was already adopted by the SABS in our country because, as I said, conversion of vehicles is not new in South Africa. My personal experience in it is more than 20 years in South Africa. So this is already in place and it keeps on being developed and updated as needed. Gas as a fuel is also included into the Road Traffic Acts and also under e-NATIS. So vehicles can be specifically registered as a gas driven or applied fuel in a vehicle itself. We also have the gas regulator, which is NERSA, that assists with all the pricing regulations of an energy source, and gas also fits into it itself. There is multiple gas associations which all belong to the SA2CC gas body, and these associations take care of the gas sources in industry from LPG, which we know is our liquid petroleum gas, or as we know, cooking gas or itself. Then we have CNG, compressed natural gas, out of the pipeline, out of our natural gas pipeline, which is quite limited in our country. And as you all are aware, LNG would also become quite available in the country. Regarding the technical committees at the moment at SABS, we're also looking at the future. This is one of the reasons I'm actually in Germany at the moment, training on hydrogen infrastructure and also updating international standards and seeing what standards can be adopted with any newer technologies in the vehicle industry for vehicles in the future to be converted to. And what's also important is all the other governmental departments, the Department of Employment, Labor, Department of Mineral and Energy Resources, Department of Transport, all supporting the initiative of actually converting vehicles itself. Just as a background, how this all fits in together, if you see the mandated regulations, firstly, we've got the Department of Employment and Labor. They use the OSH Act as their power into the industry. We've mentioned the PER, the Pressure Equipment Regulation, that looks at the gas industry itself and gas systems. And then for vehicles, we have like SANS 15500, SANS 10087 Part 6, which is the LPG. There's SANS 20110 and 2067, which is adopted international standards, European standards. And then we got the present CNG standards itself, and they all feed into the Safe Gas Equipment Scheme that would also regulate the quality of the equipment itself. But the question is, why would we want to start converting vehicles to gas? Firstly, there's more gas available in the world than the availability of oil. There's actually, if we look at the current quantities of oil available, there's 5 times more gas available at this stage. And we all know everybody is moving away from a carbon footprint, reducing emissions. And this is a way to be more environmentally friendly by actually using alternative fuel sources for vehicles. Transport contributes quite a lot of emissions into our country, sometimes up to as high as 40%. And this is a way of actually reducing our carbon footprint itself. Gas is also a lot cheaper, and that's why it's also much more beneficial to actually use gas as a fuel. We all know the current price hikes in fuel itself, and this would make it the ideal opportunity to start looking at the benefits of converting vehicles itself. I've mentioned the future of hydrogen. We don't just believe in hydrogen as fuel cells, but also maybe hydrogen in technologies for internal combustion. And as I mentioned before, autogas conversions has been done, but the more demand there is, the more jobs would be created, the more training and skills are needed to transfer this new technology into the market, and subsequently also we'll need more supply of refueling infrastructure, because the more the vehicles there are, it's always the chicken egg scenario. Must there first be a refueling station, or must there first be vehicles? You actually need both in the industry to actually make it work. There's quite a few combinations of technologies used with different applications, and as you can see there, but I'll take you through it in more detail going further. Your normal biofuel conversion, normally a LPG or CNG, which would be your petrol vehicle that you convert to gas. So you either drive on gas or you either drive on petrol. You can switch it over at any specific time. Then you've got the dual fuel, and here I'm showing examples of the Johannesburg Metro bus, which is buses, more than 140 buses already running on dual fuel for more than 5 years in the metro. So it's technologies that's already happening in our country itself and being applied. Here you would use normally CNG or LNG itself. Then further on, dedicated CNG. This is where you only use gas as a fuel source. You totally remove the petrol or diesel application and only run on gas. And this could also be done either LPG, CNG, or LNG itself. And then going to the future as well, looking at LNG refueling stations, LNG vehicles. There is some tests being done currently in the country with some LNG vehicles. So this is some of the future that we are looking at, and we're starting to get ready to actually apply it. I've mentioned hydrogen. It's a big topic, a lot of exposure of that in the last 2 years since COVID, but it will become a reality. It's all about getting to technology maturity, and that would also be a total carbon-free technology as an alternative fuel source itself in the way. Then we've talked about all the types of gases, but it's also important to look at all the type of renewable gases. And here we're talking about biogas. If the world was that simple and we could have just put a cow onto a car, plug it in from behind and actually drive it, what a good place. But there's more technologies involved. Gas must be upgraded to certain standards for the vehicle itself to actually be used in the industry going forward in the life itself. There's some of my contact details, and I hope I really be able in a very short time to actually give you a background of what is needed in the industry and why it's so important to do it in the industry.
Thank you so much, Eddie, and thanks for sharing your contact details. I'm sure a lot of people will be in touch with you. Again, just a big thank you for being part of this all the way from Germany. I know you're there for training, and I hope that's going well, but we are really appreciative that you've taken the time to join us today, and thank you very much for a very insightful presentation.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Cool, man. Our next speaker is Ati Serfontein, who will be talking about pilot projects and results to date. Ati, over to you. Good to see you, and thanks for being here again today.
And it's an absolute pleasure, of course, being around for the second time around. Just give me a second, and then I'm going to screen share as well, and then we will be off with our slide, or rather our talk. Just to confirm, Neil, my slideshow, is it visible?
Yes, Ati, all is good.
Thank you so much. So, Neil, good afternoon, and also good afternoon to Team Automechanika, as well as my fellow panelists and delegates here today. Thanks again for the warm welcome. It's both an honor and privilege to form part of the Automechanika series of webinars, and hope you'll find the session to be informative and thought-provoking, and have some food for thought to take away with you today. You'll also note that I've posted links of articles of RMI-RR's gas conversion project in the chat for even more details. So you're more than welcome to use those links to obviously access these press releases and a couple of radio interviews that we've done to date as well. Now, obviously, with that being said, let us then kick off with the slideshow, or rather the talk. Now, as you all know, the topic today is powered by gas and why Autogas is a viable alternative energy source. And then my talk specifically will surround the GCP, or more specifically, the gas conversion project that's currently underway and driven by ARA. Now, ARA's GCP, or gas conversion project, originated out of a critical need to stay current and relevant insofar new technology and energy is concerned. Now, over here, I'm referring to 4IR or 5IR, or other words, the fourth industrial revolution as well as the fifth. Now, that said, obviously with 4IR and 5IR, there's new technology that's coming to the fore. And that's why it's so important for businesses, obviously, to encapsulate that and form and make that part of your business models today in order to stay current, but moreover, to be able to service the demand of market as well as consumers today. Now, obviously, that being said, there's a real concern in industry about the longevity and future of ICE, or the internal combustion engine, within the remanufacturing subsector due to this disruptive technologies, which I've just mentioned as well. Now, the motoring world is currently on a drive to net zero emissions, with LPG at its core as the alternative energy. So if I can maybe just stop there for a second and say that even though LPG is still a fossil fuel, because it is really derived or a byproduct of crude oil or coal, it is seen as a five-star, a five-star fossil fuel, which will be the transitioning fuel to net zero emissions to 2050. Now, with that being said, LPG will reduce greenhouse gases, or global warming as we know it, which have accelerated the vehicle manufacturers' focus on alternative drive methodologies. Now, the key objective is to establish a drive system, or fuel, if you will, which will emit the lowest overall levels of emissions. And at the same time, an equally important objective is to move away from the use of fossil-based fuels towards resources which are more emissions-free and, above all, sustainable, which is the key word here, sustainable. Now, with a growing consumer demand in new technology, we've embraced the opportunity to branch out in terms of our offering to the motoring public. That said, technology offers new and profitable revenues. And as I mentioned earlier, it's so important to obviously make new energy and new technologies part of your business in order to ensure that you stay current and relevant to the market today. ARA is also working in close proximity with industry stakeholders like Autogas SA, insofar upskilling of ARA's workshops, and due to hard work, due diligence, and good and proper governance, like conformity to industry standards, brand-specific requirements, and ARA's criteria to uphold the safe practice, that ARA have structured a national footprint will soon be able to retrofit, maintain, and repair gas systems fitted to ICE driving systems countrywide. Now, with that being said, there may be a question or two or 100, I don't know, in your mind, lingering in your mind as to why gas conversions now, or why gas conversions as opposed to solar, or as opposed to EVs, your electric vehicles. Now, the simple answer for that is LPG is readily available in terms of infrastructure, in terms of supply, and in terms of EV, there's a good couple of decades of development and infrastructure development that needs to take place before EV will have a good position and a good demand within South Africa. So I have listed a couple of points as to why gas conversions than anything else at this point in time. I think, well, let me mention them quickly for you. LPG is clean, it's safe, it's convenient, it is available, it's growing, it's leading the way, ready for tomorrow, and it's cost efficient. And if I can, I would like to emphasize at least 2 or 3 which is pertinent to the webinar today. And I think first of which will be it's cost efficient. Now, the saving of up to, listen to this, of up to 50% in the case of petrol and almost 30% for diesel, dependent, of course, to fuel prices. And then, and I think this is also one of the main things, that it's clean in terms of emissions. Also a point that Eddie alluded to a bit earlier as well. Now, vehicles running on LPG produce far less harmful emissions than its counterparts or your fossil-based fuels like, of course, petrol and diesel. And then I think the last point I would like to make here, it is leading the way. South Africa is currently finalizing its GMP, or better known as the Gas Master Plan, or pathway to net zero emissions by 2050. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for lending me your ear. And over to you, Neil.
Thank you so much, Ati. That was great. We appreciate your efforts in preparing for this today. Very insightful. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, we are very fortunate to have Frank Mcnichol. He's going to be dealing with the topic of upskilling the workforce and training. And Frank, over to you. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon, panel. Good afternoon, colleagues. The difficult part about what I have to say is being the third speaker, so everybody has stolen the thunder by way of introduction. There's a lot that I was going to say, and Eddie started off by saying it all, and then to add insult to injury, Ati came along and said the rest. So there's not too much I can say. I've been in this industry for some 48 years. I enjoy the technical side. So as far as the gas project goes, LPG, I'm heavily involved in the technical side. And then also the upskilling of members, their workshops, their staff. So we've got a turnkey operation going under the umbrella of ARA, our association. And if this goes according to plan, we'll be rolling out pretty soon. Apologies, the lack of technology on my side caught up to me. So Ati's going to be handling my slideshow and I'll be doing the rest. Ati, you can move on. Thank you. Thank you. So the upskilling of the workforce and training, I must take you back and then bring you to today. So next one, please, Ati. South Africa is in dire need of security energy access, coupled with a clear pathway of decarbonization. The answer to the country's energy questions seems to lie in a well-balanced combination of gas and renewable energy. How can a country so reliant on coal make the transition from a carbon-heavy today to a carbon-free tomorrow? Well, the answer lies in a bridge, and that bridge is gas. Adi? The history of Autogas begins in the mid-1930s. LPG had been discovered in Germany only a few years earlier as a condensate when compressing refinery off gas to extract gas oil. It was being sold in cylinders as propane and butane, what is a less refined mixture of both components. In 1934, Germany kicked off a program to increase independence from oil imports. By 1942, autogas systems had become very popular due to the scarcity of conventional fuels. The supply of LPG was then plentiful. It's Ati. German autogas consumption was about 50 times higher than what was delivered to households for cooking. The first generation systems were developed for spark ignition engines and heavy-duty diesel engines, which was then called dual fuel. The liquefied fuel stored in cylinders or fixed tanks is fed in liquid phase to a converter, which vaporizes the fuel and regulates the pressure to a set value. The system is entirely mechanically operated at very few moving parts. The slightly more complex system, relying on a diaphragm to regulate the gas flow depending on manifold pressure, was developed in the US. Technical solutions elaborated in those years set the reference for decades to come. The simple technology spread to other countries and was used in the south of France and in Italy with both LPG and natural gas. Strict emission standards forced the widespread introduction of three-way catalysts. This is where the trouble started, in the exhaust system of every car. The mixture needed to be monitored more precisely in order to maintain the air-fuel ratio needed for correct catalyst operation with onboard diagnostic systems. We call it the OBD today, monitoring the quality of combustion. Electronic controls were added to Venturi systems to enable fine adjustments to the mixture needed for correct operation of the catalyst. This formed the second generation of developments. Late iterations did away with the mixture altogether and delivered the fuel directly before the intake of each cylinder. Apart from mitigating the backfire risk, these systems were much more precise in terms of fuel distribution and the loss of power normally associated with autogas. This could be reduced drastically. These constant flow injection systems of the third generation were equipped with a variable valve controlled by the electronics to regulate the flow. Completely independent electronics include their own timing tables for the injection and drive the car independent of the original electronics. Some of the components needed for conversion include the fuel tank, regulator, fuel rails, adapter plugs, new fueling computer, and LPG injectors. What is LPG and how is it made? LPG stands for liquefied petroleum gas, the type of liquid gas that can be used as the fuel for a variety of purposes, including the powering of cars. Also referred to as butane and propane gas, or autogas in motoring circles, is the byproduct of the processing of natural gas liquids, as well as the refining of crude oil. While traditionally it was deliberately burned off and wasted, is now recognized as a versatile, low-carbon fuel and used productively. Although the phrase liquid gas appears to be a contradiction in terms, it actually describes a clear gas that turns to liquid when subjected to pressure or cooling. It's this characteristic that allows it to be stored in the tanks in the vehicle. Most petrol cars can be fitted with an LPG, a liquid petroleum gas conversion, turning them into dual fuel cars. They can run on LPG as well as petrol. Autogas, also called automotive LP gas, is the most widely used alternative fuel for road transport, powering more than 27 million vehicles worldwide, including the famous yellow American school buses. And this is done for health reasons, by the way. They found that these children on these buses did better in school than those that used to travel on diesel buses. Apart from its environmental and economical benefits, autogas has also been shown to be one of the safest automotive fuels. While there is considerable awareness of the environmental and economic benefits of autogas, it's also important to note that autogas is an especially safe vehicle fuel with an outstanding health and safety record. With over 27 million vehicles, as said, on the road worldwide, autogas has demonstrated a strong safety record, better than vehicles operating on traditional fuels such as petrol. Autogas vehicle tanks are manufactured to meet or exceed the most stringent standards, and rigorous crash test demonstrates that autogas tanks are stronger than conventional fuel tanks. Constructed from composite and carbon steel, they are 20 times more puncture resistant and will survive much greater impacts than a typical petrol, methanol, or ethanol tank. So, in conclusion, there are compelling environmental, operational, and safety reasons for including autogas in any strategy aimed at promoting alternate fuels for road transport. Nigerian Technical Advisor for Petroleum Resources says the autogas scheme of the federal government will create 2 million jobs annually. In South Africa, we have a golden opportunity to introduce LPG into our market. We need gas conversion staff. We need gas supply staff. We need, we need courier companies. We need taxi and Uber type vehicles that will run cheaper. Security companies will benefit. Municipalities will benefit. They will benefit financially and be green. Provinces will benefit and also be green. Government will benefit and also be green. Gas stations will need staff. Exhaust emissions will be greatly reduced. At the end of the day, there will be more money in everybody's pocket. Thank you so much. We're ready for questions afterwards.
Thank you so much, Frank. That was really interesting. I learned a lot listening to you, so thank you very much for all of your efforts in preparing that. Just a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, we get into our panel discussion time now, but if you do have any questions, please post them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and then they can be posed to the panel. On that note, I'm going to introduce Justin Schmidt, who will be hosting a panel discussion related to the presentations that have just been delivered. He's been reviewing the questions in the Q&A tab. And Justin, it's been an interesting conversation. I look forward to you putting these panelists under a little bit of pressure. So on that note, over to you. And thank you for being here, Justin. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Neil. I think also, yeah, fascinating topic. I think for me, in the portfolios that we look at, sustainability is a key element that we kind of try to understand from a future of all these sectors perspective, whether it's the transporter, the manufacturer, or just from an energy perspective. So I think I'll jump into some of those questions. Also learned a lot. I think sustainability is not about just, as a bank, it's not just the carbon, right? It's about saving money. So I think we'll also dive into some of those questions. But Frank, because you said everyone else had stolen your thunder, let me start with a question to you so no one steals your thunder on the questions. And maybe just a quick kind of recap. So what, if I'm thinking of kind of my petrol engine versus an autogas engine, what are the primary differences that I need to keep in mind between those two fuel stocks?
Firstly, autogas, LPG. I'm an LPG man. LPG is 104 octane versus your 95 octane. So without even being technical, you can see the burning is a lot cleaner. So your emissions is a lot cleaner. Petrol is normally between 40 and 50% more expensive than gas. You ride the same distance on 1 liter of gas. We convert the liters into the kilograms into liters. So you ride the same distance, so there's not too much of a difference there. Your engine, and I'm going to answer all my questions in one. Your engine runs cleaner, but it runs cleaner inside as well because there's no oxidation or contamination from your petrol that seeps past your rings into your oil. So your engine lasts longer. Your servicing intervals gets doubled. So you're saving on fuel, you're saving your engine, and you're saving on service intervals. It's a win-win situation. There's just no ways that you can even think of not doing it.
I've got a bunch of follow-up questions, but I'll keep them for just now. Yes, so I think maybe you touched on one point, and if I can go to Eddie then, where we speak about kind of, yeah, this. So maybe my question there is, why isn't there a greater take-up? And if I could ask you then, kind of, are we ready to convert our cars if the story is so good? Is South Africa ready for this? And a follow-up is, why haven't we done it yet?
Okay, I'm going to start with your last part. There was a lot of initiatives where there was a drive from a lot of institutions to start conversions of vehicles. I would say there were, in the last 20 years, 3 to 4 different initiatives. And it was all about my, let's call it second slide, making sure that all the components is in place. In the beginning, there was just convert your car and put gas in it and you'll save money, or it's better for environment. But there wasn't sufficient refueling stations. There wasn't sufficient workshops to support the vehicles, maintain them. And I think that was the reason why we're not there where we should have been at the stage. And then next is, are we ready for it now? I think from regulating point, yes, we are ready. I did mention that infrastructure, the chicken egg scenario needs to be there. But as soon as there's either the vehicles or the infrastructure, things will start happening. And it's normally driven by the saving at this stage. And after that, the added benefits of environmental would come in there.
Perfect. And I think maybe, Ati, I'm trying to check my notes. I'm pretty sure you said something about the savings and that it's 50% cheaper than, no, I think that was you, Eddie, 50% cheaper than petrol, 30% cheaper than diesel. Is that did I have it the right way around?
Yes, Justin, that was me making the remark. And obviously it will all, fluctuate due to the, to the climbing, fuel prices. But as it stands at this point in time, in terms of, ULP or petrol, of course, 93, 95, there's really, up to 50%, saving in terms of that. Not only saving, but also it's a much greener technology, or energy rather, in terms of, your fossil fuels as well. So yeah, so that's my answer in short.
Yeah, and I think maybe also leaning, I've got a bunch of notes here that, for any of these new sectors to grow or something, I mean, it is old, but for it to kind of scale up, you do need that certainty. So this gas master plan, I think, is key to all of that, and how do we kind of grow the industry in time. So maybe for you, Ati, what do you see in terms of the role that the sector, this Autogas or LPG is going to play, not only from kind of filling your car and the obvious savings, if this is 5 times more supply than oil, and you hopefully see that those pricing pressures are less than oil and therefore petrol as well as diesel in the future. So I think that one, everyone's spoken about that. So I think there's the tick. But what do you see kind of as the spin-offs across the board for this sector?
Well, immediately, as I mentioned in my last slide as well, it is readily available. There's a huge cost saving. And it's really about, I would say, a window period that at this point in time is opening up for South Africa. You've also noted me or heard me saying that LPG will be the transitioning fuel being used to net zero, or to the path to net zero emissions to 2050. Now that's around about 27 years, from now. So in my personal opinion, our window period is now, and the season is right for us, for South Africa, in terms of infrastructure, and something that we should obviously, harvest, and something that we should, make use of, up until we are at that point where we can embrace, EVs. Obviously, also 27 years is a good time frame for businesses to adjust and to adapt and to upskill their staff complement. So over and above, everything else, I would say, we can look at other parts of, the world, like, the EU, whether that be the Netherlands, Turkey, Poland. There's really good news stories coming from those countries. They've gone through this whole process already, and they are at a point where the infrastructure in terms of EVs is now in place, where the transitioning fuel, which is LPG, have been utilized to the utmost. I hope that answers your question, Justin.
That's great. Thanks,
Justin,
yes, Frank?
Can I add on to that?
Yeah, 100%.
30 years, well, 30, 40 years ago, in the 70s, our cars from the 70s have been cleaned up in such a way through technology, fuels, oils, that today the same cars are 50% cleaner at the tailpipe. Yeah? And what we're doing now is we're taking that car that's 50% cleaner and we're cleaning it by another 50% by going LPG. That in its own says a lot. And then without knocking EVs, because that's possibly the way the world's going to go, or not, there's a lot of controversial discussions taking place about that. But let's be honest, nowhere in the world is there a country that can supply enough electricity for everyday living and motor cars. Nowhere in the world, especially not South Africa, especially not India, especially not the US. And then we haven't started on the South Americas either. So you can think for yourself, something's got to be done to take technology that we have and go green with it is probably the way to go. At the same time, we are now extending the life of every repairman out there. We're extending the life of every workshop out there, because we're not stopping the automotive engineering companies and garages and plugging in an electric motor, like fixing a fridge motor. We are still doing what we're supposed to do. So we're extending the life of all of these. That's thousands of people per country. I hope that gives you a bit of an answer.
And so we like EVs because it's driving down the cost of battery. So at least you can get a bit of protection from load shedding, as we're experiencing at the moment. But I think this kind of is very much food for thought, especially from a bank that focuses on the transport sector. Massive emitter, but those are the kind of companies that have the biggest role to play in reducing carbon emissions. So more efficient cars reduce your carbon footprint. So I think it's not about kind of stopping the growth of an industry. It's really being more efficient and finding these cleaner sources. So I won't chat too much about EVs. I think maybe just before I go to Eddie, because I've got something from a banking perspective I really want you to answer. But Frank, you spoke about those yellow buses. That's something I didn't know about, but how much of the fleet in the US is, in terms of the school buses, is completely running on LPG? And then in a global context, how big is this versus, we always hear about EVs versus ICE vehicles, but what's the market penetration of LPG as percentage globally?
As I said, 27 million cars are running on gas, on LPG. To come back to the school buses, all school buses run on LPG. Now, the claim is that the gases emitted on petrol and diesel is so much more harmful that it can be picked up in the children's marks come end of the year. There's sufficient proof that those that ride on a yellow bus versus any other vehicle, there's a vast difference. I'm not smart enough to give you the figures on that, but I don't think the Americans would take a fat chance on that. And I don't think they'd waste their money by putting them all on LPG. And you can imagine all school buses in America are state funded. Each school has got 30 or 40 buses. You can imagine how many of them are running around America. That must prove a point.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thanks. So Eddie, let me go to kind of, where a bank is always worried. protecting our assets and kind of looking at warranties and that sort of thing. So if I'm converting, what do you, from a standards perspective, is the one point, but are there kind of considerations you need to keep in mind from a warranty perspective, that you're not going to null and void whatever you have with your manufacturer?
Firstly, from a standards perspective, it's more to make sure that the safety and the quality of the conversion is up to standard and would meet all the requirements of a country. And that's why we adopt a lot of the international standards. We don't need to reinvent the wheel regarding standards. We can just adopt a lot of the standards in countries that's proven the technology itself. And then secondly, regarding warranties, there's a lot of these systems internationally that's what we call OEM approved. So the OEM would actually approve the installation and still keep the warranty if that installation is done within OEM specifications and procedures. That's the part that we need to start transferring to South Africa. But we need the numbers to justify that transfer, because it's a lot of skill in technology transfer into South Africa, which the OEMs would not want to spend money at this stage till they are sure there's quantities of order that justify that transfer of skill. But it does exist. You can buy a vehicle in Europe, in a lot of countries, already converted off the show floor, and it's immediately converted and used with all your warranties in place. So that's what's important, that when you do certain conversions on either big or expensive fleets, heavy duty vehicles, that you keep that OEM approval as part of your conversion.
So it sounds like we don't, like you said, don't have to reinvent the wheel. And even though the master plan is coming, it's like a lot of other industries, the energy industry with renewables, we've built a strong stream of kind of quality installers, and there's a lot of these installations out there. And sometimes we just got to wait for the regulation, but at least we know that, yeah, we can apply international standards, and it is happening. Maybe just as something you mentioned, you also look at biofuels and biogas. How big a role does that have to play? Are we more looking at, like Ati said, Autogas is the transition into EVs? Do you have any alternate views on those other sort of feedstocks?
Alternative fuels in all types of matters, even if you take biomass and you go to what we talk a biomethane, which can exactly be used as compressed natural gas or LNG. It's called renewable natural gas. It solves a lot of problems. It doesn't just supply a fuel source, but also sorts out a waste problem or a waste recycling problem. And then we get to a circular economy where we actually solve a problem on the waste side, reuse that carbon energy and resync the carbon into the transport sector as an alternative fuel. And that's when we start getting to a point where we're producing a localized fuel for the transport industry itself. Something that I just want to add is in countries, Berlin, Italy, a lot of the EU countries, it's a fact that you can't go into center of town if you've got a petrol or diesel vehicle. You can only go into center of town if it's a gas or EV vehicle. And as you know, the EU also started with a process of stopping manufacturing of diesel or petrol engines in a few years, but they don't say anything about stopping the manufacturing of gas-driven engines. So that's why we need to start looking at that development, because internationally the development of diesel or petrol vehicles is going to stop at a certain point, and the development would just only continue in gas-driven type of vehicles.
Perfect. Thanks, Eddie. And maybe Ati, I don't know if this is fair to ask you this one, but yeah. So we said there's 4 times or 5 times more supply of gas than oil. Where are those major supplies? Because I mean, at the moment, why I'm asking this question, we've obviously seen a spike in oil prices. There's the OPEC producing nations. We know that anything happens and there's a problem with that supply. We've heard about the refinery issues locally. Yeah, so from a supply, kind of where we're getting it, how readily available, even though there is 5 times, are there any potential risks of where we're getting our gas from?
Justin, that's a very good question, and we get that question quite a lot. Even with, if I may, the current war that's going on as well. There's a lot of questions pertaining to that. But if I can narrow that down, there's a lot of deposits in sub-Saharan Africa, like Madagascar. Even in South Africa, there is supply in St. Helena Bay, also in Richards Bay. And so in terms of the supply of gas, whether that be by floating or a floating ship, or whether that be by road freight, we have no problem at all for the supply of gas to have it readily available within sub-Saharan Africa. So you'll also note in terms of the GMP that South Africa is working closely with EU countries as well as sub-Saharan Africa in terms of the supply of gas. So again, and I would like to emphasize that Edie wasn't making any jokes when he mentioned that there's 5 times more supply of gas as opposed to its counterpart in terms of crude oil as well as coal.
Thanks for that. Neil, I don't know if we were time for one final question.
Definitely. It's a great conversation.
Okay, you can tell me when to stop.
Yeah, all good. It's all good. Keep going.
So there is, whoever wants to answer this one, but because I think we've done the one question, 2 questions each, but you were speaking about NERSA regulating the price of, I think it was you, Eddie, the price of gas. We know what's happened with Eskom's prices, and that's kind of exceeded what transporters are seeing on the cost of fuel. So just in terms of gas being cheap, are there any risks there, and what's the kind of short-term forecast? And is gas kind of a mixture between what we see from a utility Eskom perspective and the global oil prices and what we see with BFP and ultimately the price at pump? How does it work with NERSA on gas? And then, where do you think those prices are going? Do we have the risks that we did see in the electricity industry?
Thank you. Yeah. With NERSA, if we look at LPG, it's because it's a crude product. One of the off taps of the Fisher Tropsch, so that would be very linked to the crude prices, so it moves in relation with the crude. However, market demand, supply and demand will play a big role. We've got 2 of the biggest LPG import terminals in the Southern Hemisphere, each one on the our East Coast and one on our West Coast. So the supply of that would be determined through that. If we start talking natural gas, we all know about the big Rovuma gas basin, northern Mozambique, and our current natural gas pipeline. However, as mentioned, there's a lot of development in the coal bed methane development where we're going to actually have local gas, which is strictly not a crude oil based, but with mechanisms with NERSA, it has a type of following of the crude and other indicators in a pricing basket. But if you have a certain percentage saving due to the type of mechanism in the basket, those savings should stay in place and will move either up and down with crude or other utility pricing going forward. And that's where NERSA plays the role, making sure that that pricing mechanism and basket is in such a way to keep it standard and priced going forward as a positive to the alternative.
Perfect. I see we are at 3. Yeah, can I just leave it for closing comments, Neil?
100%, Justin. Yeah, I know, that's cool.
Yeah, because I will carry on asking questions. But let's not rush over too far over. Yeah, but maybe if I can kind of closing remarks from each panelist. Firstly, thank you. Fascinating, and I think this is clearly a topic. We spend a lot more time talking about EVs than we do gas, but we do spend a lot of time about sustainability of this sector from a carbon perspective, but also the cost pressures. And I think there's great opportunities for both manufacturing as well as transporters in kind of and just becoming more efficient businesses. So we always say that kind of the business case kind of leads the carbon. These technologies kind of pay for themselves, actually. So that's the great thing in a lot of these areas. But maybe if I can ask each of you to just give us a closing remark, and we'll end it there. Thank you. Starting with you, sorry, Ati, you're the first person on my screen, so I'll jump to you.
Beautiful. We'll do just that. So I would like to, maybe if I can mention, job opportunities, within South Africa. And that's it, gas conversion equipment and components are mostly derived from the EU-dominated countries like Italy, Turkey, and Poland. And will the GCP, or the gas conversion project, bring opportunity to South Africa as well to localize manufacturing of gas conversion components? And I think that is essential to be able to source certain components, or all of the components, if you will, within arm's reach within South Africa. That will be our ideal, and I believe that is coming. Also, with that being said, with implementation or adding of dedicated gas conversion departments to your business, whether you will be focusing on conversions only, and then obviously there's also opportunity to become a supplier of gas, opportunity will arise for skills development and job creation locally within South Africa. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, team Automechanika.
Thank you, Ati. I think, Eddie, if I can go to you, and then I'll go to Frank.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I want to say that if we look at the rest of the world, in some countries there was anything from 5 to 10% penetration, and in other countries there's up to 50% plus penetration of vehicles converted on gas itself. And I think that proves that in the right environment, with the right pricing and the right support, it could be quite a successful process and benefit everybody from workshop level down to supplier level, training, skills development. All of that can beneficiate out of that going forward. And then lastly, I see there's some Q&A questions that we could not deal with. I'll be happy to try and answer some of those afterwards, if maybe Neil or somebody can assist that we actually answer that. And then thank you for the opportunity, and I hope we can only build from this going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. I think that was also the closing remark I wanted to make, that we will, just find a way. There's a whole bunch of questions there that are very valuable. So we will follow up on all of them. Frank, if we could get to your closing remark.
Yes, thank you. And we'd certainly like to carry on with the Q&A. I think in closing, we as the RMI have the infrastructure to roll this out. In fact, within the next couple of weeks, we'll start off with the Western Cape. We've got a good dozen or so members that are ready to sign on the dotted line, as it may be, and kick off with the project. We have the infrastructure. We have sourced the correct EU-approved kits for South Africa. At the end of the day, everybody is going to benefit. So, yep, we're ready to go.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. That's all the questions, and no one's dropping off. So Neil, I don't know how you propose we get to all the rest of the questions, but
I think what we can do is we can answer the questions post the webinar. How many questions are there still, Justin, that you'd like to pose?
There's probably about 5 for sure. yeah.
Okay, so if I may ask, it's up to the panel. If you guys are happy to stay on, answer some of those questions. Justin, are you happy? Have you got the time?
I've only got internal meetings, so I've got time.
Okay, Ati and Frank and Eddie, are you good for another 5-10 minutes? Okay,
Yeah,
let's
good.
go. Good.
Cool, lekker. So I think I'll just I think this is interesting. It's the last question, but EVs, you know, that you hear about how safe they are from an autonomous perspective, but then like what we also hear is batteries. There's the fire risk, right? So from Autogas perspective, what is the safety kind of considerations there? And is it safe if you are in an accident? I don't know, Frank, maybe you best placed for that.
Yeah, probably safer than any petrol or diesel driven vehicle. As I said, the tank is built in such a way that it's 20 times stronger than a petrol tank. It cannot explode. There's valves both sides, in other words, the tank side, engine side, in case of a collision. There's just no ways. There was a video doing its rounds in South America where a car blew up. It cannot happen with LPG in South Africa. It will not happen.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yes, Justin, if I may. Maybe just on that point that Mr. Mcnichol just mentioned, that incident happened in Brazil. And it's really because, you know, CNG was used to fill a LPG tank. And that's I think that's the reason for the implosion, or rather explosion. That's why it's so important, also mentioned by Eddie, that when it comes to standards, that the correct standards are being implemented to ensure that there's no mitigating risks in terms of a conversion. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's always annoying having regulation, but I think it's completely necessary as well across the board. So while it's a frustration, I think that's the world we live in, and it's for safety. Then, also moving up, I think we'll start skipping some of the others, but the cost of conversion, while we said the cost of kind of refilling, we spoke about that, but kind of what would you pay to convert, just a motor vehicle and then a truck as well? Who's best placed for that question?
I think let Eddie speak truck and I can speak motor vehicle. Eddie is a buffer on the truck side, and I do the car side. So Eddie, give it your best shot, then I'll do the car one.
Thank you very much. Look, the cost can vary anything, and it's model specific. So I need to give you a wide angle, anything from, if we talk heavy duty vehicle trucks, 350 horsepower and up, we're talking about 200,000 to 250,000 per conversion. And it's all about what range does the operator need, how far does he need to travel on gas, how many kilometers he does per day, and what quantity of fuel you're going to replace would also determine how quickly is that payback. It sounds a lot of money, but there's some of these trucks that run 24/7, and the payback, the return on investment is sometimes as low as 4 months on that figure, due to the difference in saving and the quantity of fuel actually being used. So there's a lot of factors. It's not just about what do I pay to put it on, it's about how you use it and what's the return on investment and the savings.
But well, I guess then that leaves me to answer the car one. Justin, is it good?
Yeah.
Right. So the car light commercial vehicle bucky would probably be in the range of 15,000, definitely less than 20. You'd pay that back within a year if you like a delivery service or a small fleet owner, something like that. But it shouldn't go more than 15,000 rand.
And maybe Yeah, so I think the gas price we did chat about in, there's a question about pushing up the prices and how do we make sure it doesn't get to oil, but I think we touched on that from a nurse perspective. I think if we do want to give more detail, we'll do that follow-up as Neil had said, to answer some of these questions.
What's happened, Jason, is because, as Eddie pointed out, the gas is a spin-off from fossil fuel. No matter what happens to the oil price and the diesel price, gas goes up as well, but in relation to, so the gap is always there. It's always close to 50% cheaper, no matter what happens.
Yeah, I won't ask it now, but I'm also quite interested to see, we always talk about EVs, where do you get the money back from the lost taxes? But let's leave that. Sorry, Frank.
If you speak to Eddie about EVs, and Eddie's got a good phrase, it's called cradle to grave. In other words, from when they start building an electric vehicle until they dispose of, it is scary. What happens behind the scenes, that car starts off dirty. Although you're plugging it into your house and are not having emissions, it starts off dirty and gets dirtier the more you charge it, because you're charging it with dirty electricity. The batteries made in China out of a coal-fired power. I can carry on. Don't go there. EVs are dirty.
But you can get your funding through ABSA for your solar installation for home and charge it through your solar. Okay, we did touch on the infrastructure, but maybe like getting very specific on it. If we scale this, who's going to pay for the increase in infrastructure? So we're ready, but obviously there's going to need to be the investment in the infrastructures to roll this out. So who are the players that will invest in that?
Ati, you come in there.
Yeah, sure, Justin, thanks. We have, state organs already busy for many a year, as well as government and entrepreneurs and, companies from the public sector as well. So there's a lot of money, and I'm not talking about millions, I'm talking about billions, almost not in rands, but almost in dollars. That's been invested in the infrastructure. Now, we're also talking about up and coming, filling station, a dedicated filling station on your way to KZN that will be, only supplying CNG and LPG. So that's up and coming, that's in the making. And, with that being said, as Mr. Mcnichol pointed out, South Africa is ready to go.
Any other kind of additions to that question?
If I can maybe add to that, the suppliers of the gas is willing to invest in the infrastructure because logically their product would move through that, and on the basis typically to any of your other petroleum companies. So that's where the one side starts. And if we look downstream, part of the RMI is a big network of workshops that can actually support these whole system from conversions and stuff. And you don't need a specialized, dedicated workshop. It can fit into most of all the workshops currently in the industry as an add-on product of doing conversions and supporting and servicing these vehicles going further. So from a supply point of view, I think a lot of the suppliers would be interested from a refueling infrastructure. And then from a conversion point of view, I think that's where RMI is going to play the big role in making sure that that infrastructure is there to actually convert the vehicles and actually aftermarket support of the industry.
Thank you. And I think last webinar we spoke about remanufacturers, and I think all these things are key considerations, the spin-off jobs and what you're doing to the rest of the industry. There's two big topics. I think we've answered the rest of them through the question and answers. But let's kind of look at these and give more detail offline to answer them in detail if anyone thinks we haven't addressed it. But does anyone want to get into the hydrogen fuel cell technology versus autogas?
If I can maybe do that, if you're happy. Hydrogen is still, I would say, not a mature technology, where the gas conversion is actually already a mature. So we cannot compare the two technologies at this stage. As you know, it's always a numbers game, and as technologies develop, they become all cheaper. So at the moment, the hydrogen fuel cell, the production of hydrogen, the fuel cell production numbers are not there to actually say it's a viable, sustainable process. But we all know we need to go to carbon zero, and we need to go in that direction. And like any other technology, EV technology, when it started off, when we started having to buy solar panels, they were unaffordable. Look at the price of solar panels today, and I believe that that's the same route that's going to actually happen with the hydrogen technology, from hydrogen production to hydrogen fuels, the fuel cells as well, and also fit in with the EV technology going forward. There's even developments that I was made aware of this week of a lot of internal combustion engines would that be running on hydrogen going forward.
It's one I think we hear a lot about, hydrogen. Yeah, so I think there will be a lot more that we hear in the near future. I saw a hand go up, and the nice thing is we're not losing very many numbers. So I'll get to the last two kind of big questions. But Neil, can you see whose hand went up? And maybe we can address that question quickly.
I'm looking. Okay. It came up and it went down. So let me just see here.
Now let me get okay. So Africa, yeah, there's a question, was also a question kind of, yeah, things move slowly unless a common general decision. Yeah, I always like to think if it makes business sense, then it's going to get going anyway. So, and then you obviously need the infrastructure, and that all comes with it. But to your point on solar, right? In the renewables industry, we started 14 years ago. We were looking at biofuels, and no one ever thought solar was even an option back then. You know, so then the business case kind of, I was driving wind and solar. So the question is about kind of general decision and the continent. Are there discussions across the continent to spread this plan? And I suppose it's kind of pertinent as we look at the Africa Free Trade Agreement being signed and kind of building growth across the continent. But are you guys having any Africa-wide discussions? Kind of, is there Africa view on this?
Justin, if I may, or Eddie, I saw your hand. Sorry, you're more than welcome to go.
Okay, I think regarding the SADC countries, Southern Africa first, there's a lot of cooperation and working together with the same ideas of converting vehicles, firstly. There's SADC stands that looks at all the standards being shared within SADC. And if we go Africa, countries, Nigeria and along Nigeria, big development in gas conversion of vehicles going, as Mr. Mcnichol already mentioned. Egypt has been in conversions, Algeria has been in conversions. So the rest of Africa, things are happening in certain centers, and it's just a question of putting all those efforts together, not working in silos, and actually as an African continent doing it together. So that's my answer on that.
Do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, thank you, Justin. What I wanted to mention is that ARA is also part of a world council, which is called WERC. Now, this is the World Engine Remanufacturers Council, and this, gives us leeway or seats within the council, worldwide to find out exactly as to what is the situation in terms of certain, energy resources, renewable energies, what was the spin-offs in the EU, in the South Americas, in the North Americas as well. So it gives South Africa, and then more specifically, as you mentioned, the continent, a very, very good idea as to where to start and obviously where to finish, or obviously more, I would say, a pathway as to which route will be the best route to take in terms of that. So maybe just in closing, we do have, links, worldwide in terms of the development of not only certain technologies, but also energies with the likes of LPG. Thank you, sir.
Maybe Frank, you started this, but you didn't get too much into detail. There was a question about well to wheel, so I suppose cradle to the grave. Yeah, just in terms of the efficiency and the total footprint, I think I don't think we know enough about this. Yeah, we speak about it, or we give enough detail to it, but I mean, the different types of engines, so EV, ICE, and Autogas. Yeah, just a view on that efficiency from well to wheel, as John had put it.
On the internal combustion engine, how many times do you want that engine to be able to be reconditioned? Would sort of be the opposing question. If you take a normal petrol engine, you can recondition it 3 times before it comes to the end of its life. 3 times can be 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, who knows? Electric motor, when it packs up, new motor, copper mined, battery 10 years, lithium, South America, to China, to battery. The arithmetic just doesn't add up. It really doesn't add up. Internal combustion engine running on gas, as I said, is cleaner than petrol or diesel running on LPG, which means by 20 years, 30 years, technology is going to catch up to it, not the engine itself. So that engine will almost last forever running on gas because of your extended intervals, etc., and the contamination of the fuel that does not take place. So that's your answer.
Any other comments on that one?
I couldn't, put it better myself. That's just perfectly said.
Eddie, your hand popped up.
Yes, I think what we must consider, and I'm going to give this example on hydrogen as well. We mentioned about solar, and people are very skeptical about new technologies, and just think how skeptical we were of having virtual meetings, and never thought that's going to work, and it's working today. We mentioned solar was very expensive. It's getting a lot cheaper. And 4 years ago, hydrogen cost more than $10 a kilogram to produce. The current prices after COVID is below $2 a kilogram, and the ideal is to get to $1 per kilogram. And if we get to that type of prices, then suddenly hydrogen starts competing with your other fuels, utility fuels, and crude oils and things like that. And then that's going to come into the market and play a role, because suddenly it's a carbon-free fuel, and hopefully all the technologies are already then matured enough to make sense to be used. So people were very scared to start using cell phones. Now we can't live without it. And I think for any technology, you must give the technology chance to mature and be accepted and integrated into our normal lives.
Thank you, everyone. I know Colleen's just popped a question on warranties. We did chat a little bit about it, but maybe if we could guide. She does have she's part of a small commuter bus company, or a commuter bus company. But would we be able to just give some tips on kind of what's considered for the warranties and what the OEMs are expecting offline, maybe to just kind of steer in the right direction?
Okay, sorry. I think what's important is to work with your OEM supplier. Actually, that's what we're currently doing. Go with a certain project, go to the OEM and say, this is what's currently being approved internationally. We want to introduce this locally. Please, let's get the same type of approvals. We'll follow exactly the same process as internationally, so that we don't reinvent the wheel. We just adopt what was already approved overseas and then make it work locally. So it's important, if you've got a bus company or a bus fleet or truck fleet, that you actually hold hands with the OEM supplier and go through the whole process. And this is what we currently are doing in the industry.
Thanks, Eddie. I think we've gone 30 minutes over, and thank you to everyone for holding on. But I think, yeah, let's maybe close it off now. Neil, do you want to give closing remarks?
Justin, I think we could have carried on for a lot longer. Huh? I think the guys were enjoying the conversation, but I'm not too sure what Eddie and everybody's schedules are like, and also for our visitors. But what we can do, Justin, maybe if there are questions that we haven't answered, we can then try and get the answers and revert directly to the people that have posed those questions, and we can do that post the webinar. But Jess, gentlemen, thank you so much. Justin, Eddie, Frank, and Ati. I think this has been one of the most engaging conversations we've had in a long time, and the insights have been tremendous. And to all of our delegates that have joined, we'll send you a full recording of this webinar in due course. And then just to close off from my side, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all of the speakers again, and to APSA and the RMI for their support of the webinar series, and Automechanika. And then one last punt. If you guys have not registered for Automechanika yet, please do so. Go to our website and register. If you thought this was good, you'll have to come and see what's going on at Automechanika in June this year. So from my side, thank you, everybody. Thanks for all of your time. And I look forward to the next one. Thank you, everybody, and take care. Thank you, speakers.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.